Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 1. Before the sun had fully risen above the quiet valley, Ethan was already awake. The world outside his bedroom window was wrapped in a blanket of soft white mist. The hills were almost invisible. Only the tallest pine trees reached above the morning fog like silent guardians watching over the sleeping countryside. Ethan opened his window. Cool morning air drifted gently into the room. It carried the fresh scent of pine trees, damp grass, and the distant river that flowed beyond the forest. He smiled. Every morning felt like the beginning of a new adventure. Some people searched for excitement in busy cities. Ethan searched for quiet places where nature whispered its oldest stories. He quietly dressed, placed his notebook inside his small brown backpack, and walked downstairs. His grandmother was already awake. A kettle rested on the old stove, sending gentle curls of steam into the warm kitchen. Fresh bread had just come out of the oven. The comforting smell filled every corner of the little farmhouse. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," Ethan replied with a smile. His grandmother poured him a warm cup of milk with a little honey. Then she looked toward the mist outside the window. "The river will be beautiful this morning," she whispered. Ethan looked up. "How do you know?" She smiled. "The river always tells a different story after a cool night." Those words stayed in Ethan's mind. After breakfast, he stepped outside. Tiny drops of dew sparkled on every blade of grass. The birds had only just begun their morning songs. Somewhere beyond the trees, he could already hear the gentle whisper of flowing water. The river was waiting. And so, with slow and peaceful steps, Ethan began another beautiful journey. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 2. The narrow country path led Ethan toward the quiet river. The morning mist still rested gently above the fields. Every blade of grass sparkled with tiny drops of dew. The world seemed to awaken very slowly. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh earth, pine trees, and wildflowers. Ethan walked without hurry. There was no destination he needed to reach, only another peaceful morning waiting to be discovered. As he followed the winding path, he noticed a family of rabbits quietly nibbling on fresh clover beside an old wooden fence. One little rabbit lifted its ears. It looked at Ethan for a brief moment. Then, without fear, it returned to its breakfast. Ethan smiled. The countryside always seemed to welcome those who walked gently. The sun slowly climbed above the distant hills. Its golden light began to melt the morning mist. Little by little, the valley revealed itself. Green fields stretched across the countryside. Wildflowers painted the meadows with shades of yellow, white, and blue. A pair of bluebirds flew across the sky, their cheerful songs echoing softly through the quiet air. Soon, Ethan heard the river more clearly. Its gentle voice grew louder with every step. It was not a noisy river. It did not rush. It simply flowed, calm and steady, as if it had all the time in the world. When Ethan reached the riverbank, he stopped. The water moved like polished glass beneath the golden morning light. Small ripples shimmered across the surface. Tall reeds swayed gently along the edge of the river. A willow tree leaned gracefully over the water, its long green branches almost touching the surface. Ethan walked beneath its shade. The air felt cooler there. He sat on a smooth stone beside the river and listened. The quiet splash of water against the rocks, the gentle rustling of willow leaves, the distant song of birds hidden among the trees. Each sound blended into a peaceful melody. He closed his eyes. He took one slow breath, then another. For a few wonderful moments, it felt as though the entire world had become perfectly still. When he opened his eyes again, something caught his attention. Far across the river, half hidden by the morning mist, stood a small wooden cabin. Its roof was covered with green moss. Thin curls of smoke rose slowly from its stone chimney. Someone, or perhaps something, was there. Ethan did not feel afraid. Instead, he felt quietly curious. He wondered who lived in such a peaceful place. The little cabin seemed almost like a secret the forest had been keeping for many years. A narrow wooden footbridge crossed the river a short distance away. Its old planks looked weathered but strong. Ethan looked toward the bridge, then back at the hidden cabin. He smiled softly. Perhaps today's adventure was only just beginning. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 3. Ethan stood quietly beside the old wooden footbridge. The river flowed gently beneath it, carrying tiny golden reflections from the morning sun. For a few moments, he simply listened. The bridge creaked softly as the breeze passed through its weathered wooden rails. It was an old bridge. Perhaps it had stood there for many years. Perhaps hundreds of travelers had crossed it before him. Or perhaps very few people had ever discovered this peaceful place. Ethan placed one hand upon the smooth wooden railing. The wood felt cool beneath his fingertips. He took a slow breath, then another. Without any hurry, he stepped onto the bridge. Each step created a gentle sound. Creak, creak, creak. The sound blended beautifully with the quiet whisper of the river below. Halfway across, Ethan stopped. He looked down. The water was so clear that he could see smooth stones resting on the riverbed. Tiny silver fish swam lazily through the gentle current. They moved together like little flashes of sunlight beneath the surface. A bright blue dragonfly landed on the wooden railing beside him. Its delicate wings shimmered like tiny pieces of glass. For several peaceful seconds, neither Ethan nor the dragonfly moved. The little insect seemed completely at home. Then, with a gentle flutter of its wings, it lifted into the air and disappeared toward the willow trees. Ethan smiled. Even the smallest creatures seemed to belong to this quiet place. He continued walking. Soon, he reached the other side of the bridge. The narrow path became softer beneath his feet. Wild ferns grew along both sides of the trail. Small white flowers peeped through the green leaves. Sunlight filtered gently through the tall pine trees, creating moving patterns upon the forest floor. Everything felt calm. Everything felt welcoming. As Ethan walked farther, the little wooden cabin slowly became clearer. Its walls were built from dark oak logs. The roof was covered with thick green moss. Colorful wildflowers surrounded the tiny front garden. Beside the cabin stood an old stone well. A wooden bucket rested quietly beside it. Near the front porch, a rocking chair moved gently in the breeze. Back and forth, back and forth. Yet no one was sitting there. The peaceful movement made the cabin feel warm and alive. A tiny bell hanging beside the porch roof chimed softly as the wind touched it. Its delicate sound floated gently through the quiet forest. Ethan did not rush toward the cabin. Instead, He admired every little detail. A robin carried a twig to its nest beneath the roof. Lavender flowers swayed beside the front steps. A sleepy orange cat rested peacefully in a patch of warm sunlight. The cat slowly opened one eye. It looked at Ethan for a moment, then stretched lazily, curled up once more, and returned to its comfortable nap. Ethan laughed quietly. "This place feels like a dream," he whispered. Just then, the front door of the little cabin opened very slowly. An elderly man with kind eyes stepped onto the porch. He wore a simple brown sweater and a wide-brimmed hat. A gentle smile appeared on his face. Without saying a word, he raised one hand in a warm welcome. And somehow, Ethan already knew that today he was about to hear another beautiful story. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 4. The elderly man stood quietly on the wooden porch. His gentle smile never faded. The morning breeze softly moved the brim of his old hat. For a few peaceful moments, neither he nor Ethan spoke. Sometimes, silence was the kindest greeting of all. Then the old man nodded warmly. "Good morning," he said in a calm, gentle voice. "Good morning," Ethan replied with a smile. "You must have followed the river." Ethan looked surprised. "How did you know?" The old man chuckled softly. "The river has a way of bringing kind people here." He slowly stepped down from the porch. His movements were unhurried, as though he had learned long ago that there was no reason to rush through life. "My name is Samuel," he said. "I've lived beside this river for many years." Ethan introduced himself. Samuel smiled. "Welcome, Ethan. I've been expecting a visitor." Ethan looked around curiously. "You knew someone would come?" Samuel nodded. "Not exactly, but every beautiful morning brings someone. A bird, a butterfly, a traveler, or simply a new story." The words made Ethan smile. Samuel opened the little wooden gate that surrounded the garden. "Come," he said. "Let's walk slowly." The garden was filled with peaceful colors. White daisies, purple lavender, bright yellow sunflowers, tiny blue forget-me-nots. Bees drifted lazily from flower to flower. Butterflies floated gently in the warm morning air. Near the garden stood a small vegetable patch. Tomatoes glowed bright red beneath the sun. Fresh mint filled the air with its cool fragrance. Bundles of rosemary and thyme grew beside the stone path. Everything looked healthy. Everything looked loved. Samuel gently touched one of the lavender flowers. "Plants teach us something important," he said. "They never hurry. They simply grow, a little each day." Ethan looked carefully at the flowers. He noticed that some were fully open. Others were still small buds. Yet every one of them was beautiful. "You don't need to bloom as quickly as someone else," Samuel continued. "You only need to bloom in your own time." A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of lavender across the garden. The little bell hanging from the porch chimed once again. Its soft sound blended with birdsong and the quiet whisper of the nearby river. Samuel led Ethan toward a wooden bench beneath a large maple tree. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above them, painting soft patterns upon the ground. On the bench rested a small wooden box. It looked old. Its smooth surface had been polished by many years of careful hands. Samuel opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of smooth river stones. Each one was different. Some were white, some were gray. Others carried beautiful patterns shaped by the flowing river. Samuel picked up one small stone. "The river made this beautiful," he whispered, "not by force, but with patience." He placed the little stone gently into Ethan's hand. It felt cool, smooth, peaceful. Ethan smiled. He realized that the quiet river had been teaching its lessons all along, not through words, but through gentle movement, through patience, through time. Samuel looked toward the flowing water beyond the trees. "The river has another place I'd like to show you," he said softly. "It's my favorite place in the whole valley." Ethan's eyes brightened with quiet excitement. Together, they slowly began walking toward the peaceful sound of the Whispering River. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 5. Samuel and Ethan walked side by side along the narrow trail beside the river. The path curved gently beneath tall pine trees. Their branches swayed softly in the cool breeze, filling the air with the fresh scent of pine and damp earth. Neither of them felt the need to hurry. The river flowed beside them like an old friend, whispering its endless song. Every few moments, Samuel would pause, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to notice something beautiful. A tiny yellow butterfly resting on a flower, a squirrel carrying an acorn high into an oak tree, a pair of ducks drifting peacefully along the quiet water. "The world speaks very softly," Samuel said. "Most people never hear it because they are always rushing." Ethan looked around more carefully. He realized that every step revealed something new. The sunlight danced across the river. Small fish shimmered beneath the clear water. Dragonflies floated through the air like tiny blue jewels. Soon, the trail became narrower. Large ferns covered both sides of the path. The sound of the river grew stronger. Not louder, just closer. Then the trees slowly opened. Before them lay a quiet bend in the river. The water here was wider and calmer than anywhere Ethan had seen before. It reflected the sky like a perfect mirror. White clouds drifted across its surface. Tall willow trees leaned gracefully over the water, their long branches gently touching the river. Near the riverbank stood an old wooden dock. Its planks had faded with time. A small rowboat rested quietly beside it, tied with a thick rope. It rocked gently with the slow movement of the water. Back and forth, back and forth. Samuel smiled. "This is my favorite place." Ethan understood why. The whole place felt untouched by time. No noise, no crowds, only the peaceful rhythm of nature. At the end of the dock stood a simple wooden chair. Samuel sat down slowly. He closed his eyes. For several long moments, he simply listened. Ethan did the same. The gentle whisper of the river, the soft rustling of willow leaves, the distant call of a songbird, the quiet splash of a fish returning beneath the water. Together, they formed the most peaceful melody Ethan had ever heard. After a while, Samuel opened his eyes. "When I was young," he said quietly, "I thought happiness was something I had to chase." He smiled toward the river. But the river taught me something different. It taught me that happiness often waits quietly, for those willing to slow down. Ethan looked across the calm water. He thought about his grandmother, the old gardener, and now Samuel. Each of them had shared the same lesson in a different way. Life became more beautiful when lived slowly. Just then, a cool breeze passed over the river. Tiny ripples spread gently across the water. At the same moment, the first soft raindrop landed on the wooden dock. Then another, and another. Samuel looked up at the gray clouds gathering above the trees. He smiled warmly. It seems the rain wishes to join our story. Ethan smiled too. He had always loved the sound of gentle rain. Together, they stood from the dock and began walking slowly back toward the little cabin. As the first peaceful shower of the afternoon quietly began. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 6. The rain arrived quietly, not with thunder, not with strong winds, only with soft, gentle drops that drifted down from the gray afternoon sky. Each raindrop landed softly upon the river. Tiny circles spread across the calm water, one, then another, until the entire river shimmered with thousands of delicate ripples. Ethan lifted his face toward the sky. The cool rain touched his cheeks. It felt refreshing, peaceful, as though nature itself had whispered a gentle welcome. Samuel smiled. "This is my favorite kind of rain," he said softly. "It never rushes. It simply falls, one drop at a time." Together, they walked back along the narrow riverside trail. The leaves above them caught many of the raindrops. Water gathered at the tips of the branches before falling gently to the forest floor. The scent of wet earth filled the air. Fresh pine, rain-soaked moss, wild mint growing beside the path. Every breath felt clean and calming. Soon they reached the little cabin. The warm glow from its windows shone softly through the rain. The old orange cat was sitting on the porch, watching the falling raindrops with sleepy eyes. When Ethan stepped onto the wooden porch, the cat stretched lazily, rubbed against his leg, and let out a quiet, contented purr. Samuel opened the cabin door. A wave of comforting warmth drifted outside. "Come in," he said with a gentle smile. Inside, the cabin felt wonderfully cozy. A small fire burned quietly inside a stone fireplace. Its golden flames danced slowly, filling the room with a soft, welcoming light. Wooden shelves lined the walls. They were filled with old books, smooth river stones, small clay pots, and carefully carved wooden birds. Everything had its place. Everything felt peaceful. Samuel hung his raincoat beside the door. Then he placed a black kettle over the fire. Soon, gentle wisps of steam rose into the warm air. He opened a small wooden cupboard and took out 2 simple ceramic cups. "I always drink tea when it rains," he said. "The rain seems to enjoy good company." Ethan smiled. The quiet crackling of the fireplace mixed beautifully with the gentle tapping of rain against the cabin roof. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was slow, steady, comforting. Samuel prepared a pot of herbal tea using fresh mint, chamomile, and a little wild honey. The sweet fragrance filled the cabin. He handed one warm cup to Ethan. The cup felt comforting between his hands. They sat beside the fire. Neither of them hurried to speak. Sometimes, the rain told enough stories on its own. Ethan watched the flames dance inside the fireplace. Outside, raindrops slid slowly down the small window panes. The river continued to flow beyond the cabin, its quiet voice now blending with the peaceful rhythm of the rain. Samuel finally spoke. When people think of storms, they often think of fear. He looked toward the window. But gentle rain reminds us that not every storm comes to disturb our lives. Some arrive simply to wash away yesterday's worries. Ethan looked into his warm cup of tea. He thought about those words. Perhaps every quiet rain carried a little kindness. Perhaps every cloudy afternoon held its own hidden beauty. Outside, the rain continued its peaceful song. Inside, the little cabin glowed with warmth. And for the first time that day, Ethan felt as though he had discovered not just a hidden cabin, but another place where his heart could quietly rest. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 7. The gentle rain continued to fall outside the little cabin. Raindrops tapped softly against the wooden roof. The sound blended beautifully with the quiet crackling of the fireplace. The room felt warm, comfortable, safe. Ethan wrapped both hands around his cup of tea. The warmth slowly spread through his fingers. He took a small sip. The tea tasted of fresh mint, sweet honey, and gentle chamomile. It was unlike any tea he had ever tasted before. Samuel smiled. My grandmother taught me this recipe many years ago. She always said that every cup of tea should slow your breathing. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He noticed that his breathing had already become slower. Outside, the rain showed no sign of stopping. Instead, it became softer, gentler, almost like a quiet lullaby. Samuel stood and walked toward one of the bookshelves. He carefully removed an old leather-bound journal. Its cover had faded with age. The corners were worn smooth from many years of use. He returned to his chair and placed the journal gently on the small wooden table. I've been writing in this journal for almost 40 years, he said quietly. Ethan's eyes widened. 40 years. Samuel nodded. But I never write about busy days. I only write about peaceful moments. He slowly opened the journal. The pages were filled with neat handwriting. Between some pages were pressed wildflowers. Others held small maple leaves that had turned golden with time. A few pages even contained tiny feathers, carefully placed between the paper. Samuel smiled. I don't collect things. I collect moments. He turned to one page and began reading softly. Asterisk, this morning, the river was so calm that the clouds forgot where the sky ended and the water began. Asterisk. He closed the journal again. You see, a peaceful moment doesn't have to be exciting. It only has to be noticed. Ethan thought about his own notebook waiting safely inside his backpack. Perhaps he had already begun collecting peaceful moments too. The fire continued its slow dance inside the stone fireplace. Its warm light reflected across the polished wooden floor. Outside the window, the rain had become even lighter. Tiny drops clung to the glass like little crystals. Beyond them, the whispering river continued its endless journey. Suddenly, a soft melody drifted through the room. Ethan looked around curiously. Samuel smiled. It's the wind. Above the fireplace hung several small bamboo wind chimes. The gentle breeze slipping through a slightly open window made them sing quietly. Their delicate notes floated through the cabin like tiny drops of music. No two sounds were exactly the same. Each note appeared, then disappeared, leaving behind only silence. Ethan listened carefully. The rain, the fire, the wind chimes, the river. Together, they created the most peaceful music he had ever heard. No orchestra, no audience, only nature, playing its quiet evening song. Samuel looked toward the window. The rain will soon stop, he whispered. And after the rain, the forest always becomes even more beautiful. Ethan smiled softly. He wondered what quiet surprise the evening would bring next. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 8. The rain slowly faded into silence. One by one, the raindrops became fewer, until only an occasional drop slipped gently from the roof of the little cabin. Samuel stood and opened the wooden door. A cool breath of fresh air drifted inside. The forest had changed. Everything looked brighter. The leaves glistened with tiny drops of rain. Every flower held sparkling beads of water that caught the soft evening light. The whispering river flowed quietly beside the cabin, its gentle voice sounding even clearer after the rain. Ethan stepped onto the porch. He took a slow, deep breath. The air smelled wonderfully fresh. Wet pine trees, rain-soaked earth, fresh mint, wild lavender. It was the kind of scent that made every breath feel calm and peaceful. The orange cat stretched lazily before following Ethan into the garden. It walked slowly through the damp grass, stopping every now and then to watch tiny raindrops fall from the leaves. Samuel smiled. "Come," he said. "There's something I always do after a gentle rain." Together they followed a narrow path behind the cabin. The ground was soft beneath their feet. Small puddles reflected the pale blue evening sky. The trees stood quietly, their branches heavy with rainwater. Soon they reached a small clearing. In the middle stood an old wooden swing hanging from the strong branch of a giant oak tree. Its ropes were worn but sturdy. The wooden seat swayed gently in the cool breeze. Back and forth, back and forth. Samuel rested one hand on the swing. "I built this many years ago," he said softly. "When life felt busy, I would come here. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't worry. I would simply sit and listen." Ethan sat carefully on the swing. He pushed gently with his feet. The swing moved slowly, forward, then back again. The movement was calm, gentle, almost like floating. Above him, tiny drops of water continued to fall from the oak leaves. Each one sparkled briefly before disappearing into the grass below. A rainbow slowly appeared above the distant hills. Its soft colors stretched across the evening sky. Neither Ethan nor Samuel spoke. Some beautiful moments asked only to be watched. Not explained, not interrupted, just appreciated. A pair of robins landed on a nearby fence. One began to sing softly. The other simply listened. The river continued its endless whisper. The breeze carried the sweet scent of wildflowers across the clearing. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He listened. The swing, the birds, the wind, the river, the quiet forest. Every sound blended into a peaceful rhythm. He realized that happiness didn't always arrive with something new. Sometimes it arrived by sitting still, by breathing slowly, by noticing the simple gifts that had always been there. Samuel looked toward the sky. "The rain has washed the world clean," he whispered. "And tomorrow morning, the river will tell another beautiful story." The first evening star appeared above the trees. Its gentle light shimmered against the deepening blue sky. The forest slowly prepared itself for another peaceful night. Ethan smiled quietly. He knew this was a place he would remember for a very long time. A place where every breeze, every raindrop, and every whisper of the river felt like home. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 9. The evening slowly settled over the quiet valley. The rainbow faded gently into the deep blue sky. One by one, the colors disappeared, but the peaceful feeling remained. Ethan and Samuel walked slowly back toward the little cabin. The grass still shimmered with tiny drops of rain. Every step released the fresh scent of wet earth and wild mist. The whispering river flowed quietly beside them. Its gentle voice seemed softer now, as though it, too, was preparing for the night. When they reached the cabin, Samuel paused beside the old stone well. He lowered the wooden bucket carefully into the cool water below. The rope moved slowly through his hands. A few moments later, he lifted the bucket back to the surface. The water inside looked perfectly clear. It reflected the evening sky like a tiny mirror. Samuel poured a little water into a small wooden bowl. The orange cat came over quietly and began to drink. Nearby, 2 small sparrows landed beside the bowl. They waited patiently. When the cat finished, it stepped away without any hurry. The little birds moved closer and took gentle sips of water. Ethan smiled. "Even the animals share," he whispered. Samuel nodded. "Nature has many quiet lessons. Most of them are never spoken." The evening breeze became cooler. The first crickets began their peaceful song from the tall grass. The sound spread gently across the valley. Slow, steady, comforting. Samuel walked to the porch and lit a small lantern. Its warm golden light glowed softly against the wooden walls of the cabin. The light was not bright. It did not need to be. It simply made the little cabin feel even more welcoming. Ethan sat on the wooden steps of the porch. He watched the river as the sky slowly darkened. The water reflected the first evening stars. Each tiny light shimmered for a moment before drifting away with the gentle current. Samuel joined him. For several minutes, they simply watched the river together. No conversation, no questions, only peaceful silence. After a while, Samuel spoke quietly. "Do you know why I love this river so much?" Ethan looked toward him and gently shook his head. Samuel smiled. "Because the river never looks back. It keeps every beautiful memory, but it always continues forward." Ethan looked at the flowing water. He watched a small leaf drifting gently downstream. The river carried it without struggle, without noise, without fear. Perhaps life was meant to be like that, to carry beautiful memories in your heart, while continuing peacefully toward tomorrow. The moon slowly rose above the pine trees. Its silver light spread across the quiet river. The lantern beside the cabin glowed warmly. The river whispered softly. The crickets continued their evening song. The entire valley seemed wrapped in calmness. Ethan took one slow breath, then another. He felt grateful that this peaceful place had found him. Or perhaps he had found it. Either way, he knew he would never forget the whispering river, or the little hidden cabin beside its gentle shore. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 10. The moon climbed higher above the valley. Its soft silver light covered the whispering river like a sheet of shimmering silk. The little cabin rested peacefully beneath the tall pine trees. Its warm lantern glowed gently beside the front door, welcoming the quiet night. Ethan remained seated on the wooden porch. He rested his hands on his knees and listened. The river flowed with the same calm rhythm. The crickets sang without pause. Far away, an owl called softly from deep within the forest. The night felt alive, not with noise, but with gentle sounds that brought comfort. Samuel disappeared inside the cabin for a few moments. When he returned, he carried a thick wool blanket. Without saying a word, he placed it over Ethan's shoulders. The blanket was warm. It still carried the faint scent of cedar wood and lavender. Ethan smiled. "Thank you." Samuel nodded gently. The evenings beside the river can become cool, but they're always peaceful. For a while, they watched the moonlight dance across the water. Tiny ripples carried silver reflections downstream. The river looked like a ribbon of liquid light winding through the sleeping forest. Samuel pointed toward the sky. "Look carefully." Ethan lifted his eyes. The stars seemed brighter than ever. The rain had washed the air clean. Every constellation sparkled with quiet beauty. A shooting star crossed the sky for only a brief moment. Its glowing trail disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. Ethan whispered, "I've never seen one so clearly." Samuel smiled. The sky gives little surprises to those who take time to look. They continued watching in peaceful silence. The old orange cat curled up beside Ethan's feet. Its gentle purring blended with the sounds of the river, the warmth of the blanket, the soft breeze, the peaceful night. Everything felt perfectly balanced. Samuel quietly stood. "There is one more place I'd like to show you." He picked up the lantern. Its warm golden light illuminated the narrow stone path beside the cabin. Together they walked slowly beneath the tall pine trees. The forest was quiet. Moonlight filtered through the branches, painting silver patterns upon the ground. After a short walk, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood an enormous pine tree. Its trunk was wider than Ethan could have imagined. Its branches stretched high into the night sky. Around its roots stood a circle of smooth river stones. Samuel placed the lantern in the middle of the circle. The soft light flickered gently. "This tree has watched over the river for longer than anyone can remember," Samuel said. "When I need peace, I come here." Ethan placed his hand upon the ancient bark. It felt strong, steady, timeless. A cool breeze passed through the branches above. The pine needles whispered softly. It almost sounded as though the old tree itself was breathing. Ethan closed his eyes. He listened carefully. The wind, the river, the forest, the silence. He realized that true peace was not the absence of sound. It was the harmony of gentle sounds working together. When he opened his eyes again, the moon had climbed even higher. The forest seemed brighter than before. Samuel smiled quietly. The night still has one more beautiful surprise waiting for us. Ethan looked toward the winding trail beyond the ancient pine tree. With calm curiosity, he followed Samuel deeper into the moonlit forest. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 11. Samuel walked slowly along the moonlit trail. The old lantern in his hand cast a warm golden circle of light upon the forest floor. Ethan followed quietly behind him. Neither of them spoke. The forest itself seemed to be telling tonight's story. Moonlight filtered gently through the tall pine trees. Silver light rested upon the moss-covered stones. Tiny drops of rain still clung to the leaves, sparkling like little stars whenever they caught the lantern's glow. The whispering river flowed nearby. Although Ethan could no longer see it through the trees, he could still hear its gentle voice. It sounded calm, steady, familiar, like an old friend walking beside them. After several peaceful minutes, the trail became wider. The trees slowly opened, revealing a quiet meadow hidden deep within the forest. Soft white wildflowers covered the grass. Their petals glowed gently beneath the moonlight. Fireflies floated silently above the meadow. Hundreds of tiny golden lights drifted through the cool night air. Some rose toward the trees. Others hovered close to the flowers. Together, they looked like stars that had gently fallen from the sky. Ethan stopped. He had never seen so many fireflies. The meadow felt magical, yet it was peaceful rather than mysterious. Samuel smiled. This is called the Moonlight Meadow. I discovered it many years ago, but I only visit on quiet evenings like this. A gentle breeze crossed the open field. The wildflowers swayed together like slow ocean waves. The fireflies continued their silent dance. Samuel placed the lantern on a smooth stone. Its warm light blended beautifully with the cool silver light of the moon. The meadow now glowed with two gentle colors, gold and silver. Ethan slowly walked into the middle of the meadow. He sat down in the soft grass. The earth still held a little warmth from the afternoon sun. Above him stretched an endless sky filled with stars. He leaned back and looked upward. The universe felt peaceful, so quiet, so endless. Samuel sat beside him. After a long silence, he spoke in a gentle voice. When I was a little boy, I thought the stars were very far away. He smiled softly. Now I think they are much closer. Not because the sky has changed, but because my heart has become quieter. Ethan thought about those words. Perhaps peaceful places did not bring quiet into the heart. Perhaps they simply helped us notice the quiet that had always been there. A family of rabbits appeared at the edge of the meadow. They hopped gently through the grass before disappearing once again into the forest. Nearby, a tiny fox paused for only a moment. It looked toward Ethan and Samuel with calm, curious eyes. Then it quietly continued on its way. Nothing in the meadow seemed afraid. Everything belonged. Everything trusted the peaceful rhythm of the night. Samuel looked toward the moon. The river sleeps beneath the stars, he whispered. The forest sleeps beneath the moon. And tomorrow morning, the sun will gently wake them both again. Ethan closed his eyes. He listened to the breeze. The fireflies drifted silently around him. The whispering river continued its endless song somewhere beyond the trees. For a little while, there was nothing else in the world. Only peace. Only gentle breathing. Only this beautiful night. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 12. The moonlight meadow remained perfectly still. The fireflies drifted slowly through the cool night air. Some floated close to the ground. Others wandered among the branches of the pine trees. Together, they created a quiet dance of golden light. Ethan lay back upon the soft grass. The earth beneath him felt warm from the day's sunshine, while the evening breeze gently cooled the air around him. He listened carefully. His own breathing, the whisper of the wind, the distant river, the quiet singing of crickets hidden among the meadow flowers. Every sound arrived gently. Nothing interrupted the silence. Nothing demanded attention. Samuel rested beside him with his hands folded peacefully across his lap. For several long minutes, they simply watched the stars. The sky stretched endlessly above them. Thousands upon thousands of tiny lights shimmered across the darkness. Some stars glowed brightly. Others appeared only as tiny silver dots. Yet together, they filled the heavens with quiet beauty. After a while, Samuel pointed toward the northern sky. "Do you see those 7 bright stars?" Ethan nodded. They've been guiding travelers for countless years, Samuel said softly. Long before there were roads, before there were maps, people simply looked up. They trusted the sky. Ethan continued looking upward. He imagined travelers walking through forests, crossing rivers, finding their way home beneath the same stars shining above them tonight. It made him feel connected to something much larger than himself. A gentle breeze crossed the meadow. The wildflowers swayed together like gentle waves upon a quiet sea. The sweet fragrance of lavender and clover drifted softly through the cool air. The fireflies continued their silent dance. One landed quietly on a nearby flower. Its tiny light glowed for a few peaceful seconds before lifting once again into the darkness. Samuel smiled. Nature never hurries. And yet, everything happens exactly when it should. Ethan thought about the river, the rain, the cabin, the old swing, the ancient pine tree. Every place had offered the same quiet lesson. Slow down. Breathe deeply. Notice the beauty that has always been waiting. Far beyond the meadow, a gentle mist began to rise from the river. It drifted slowly between the trees like soft white clouds floating across the forest floor. The moonlight touched the mist, giving it a gentle silver glow. The entire forest looked like a beautiful dream. Samuel slowly stood. He picked up the lantern once again. "I think it's time we return to the cabin," he whispered. "The night is becoming deeper." Ethan stood quietly beside him. Before leaving, he looked across the moonlight meadow one last time. The fireflies still floated peacefully. The flowers continued to sway. The stars remained bright above the sleeping forest. He smiled. Some places never asked to be remembered. They simply became unforgettable. Together, Ethan and Samuel began the slow walk back along the moonlit forest path. The lantern glowed warmly before them. The whispering river guided them from beside the trees. And somewhere beyond the eastern hills, another peaceful sunrise was already waiting for tomorrow. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 13. The lantern glowed softly as Samuel and Ethan made their way back through the forest. The narrow trail was quiet beneath their feet. Moonlight slipped through the pine branches above, painting silver patterns across the moss-covered ground. The forest felt peaceful. Every step seemed to slow the world a little more. The whispering river flowed nearby, hidden behind the trees. Its gentle voice guided them like an old friend walking beside them. Neither of them felt the need to speak. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations happened in silence. When they reached the cabin, the warm light from the windows welcomed them home. The little orange cat was curled into a ball on the porch, sleeping peacefully. As Ethan stepped onto the wooden floorboards, the cat opened one sleepy eye, stretched lazily, and rubbed gently against his leg before returning to its favorite spot. Samuel smiled. He never misses the sound of footsteps. Inside, the cabin was warm and quiet. The fire in the stone fireplace had settled into glowing red embers. They no longer danced with tall flames. Instead, they glowed softly, filling the room with a gentle amber light. Samuel placed another small log onto the fire. A few quiet crackles echoed through the room. Tiny sparks floated upward before disappearing into the chimney. The comforting sound blended perfectly with the distant murmur of the river outside. Samuel walked toward a wooden shelf beside the window. There stood an old oil lamp. a small compass, and a weathered pocket watch. He gently picked up the watch and smiled. "My father gave this to me when I was about your age," he said. Ethan looked closely at the watch. Its silver surface had become smooth from years of careful use. The ticking was slow and steady. Tick, tick, tick. Samuel closed the watch carefully. "You know," he said quietly, "time is a curious thing. Many people spend their lives chasing it, but no one ever catches it." He looked toward the fireplace. "So instead of chasing time, I learned to enjoy each moment that time gives me." Ethan thought about those words. He remembered how peaceful the entire day had been. The walk beside the river, the old bridge, the hidden cabin, the gentle rain, the warm tea, the moonlight meadow. None of those moments had been hurried, and perhaps that was why they felt so unforgettable. Samuel placed the pocket watch back on the shelf. Then he opened a small wooden chest beneath the window. Inside were dozens of smooth stones collected from the river over many years. Each stone carried a different color and shape. Some were pale gray, others were soft white. A few shimmered with tiny crystals that reflected the firelight. Samuel picked up one smooth oval stone. "This one reminds me," he whispered, "that the river shapes everything gently, not in a single day, but little by little." He handed the stone to Ethan. Its surface was cool and perfectly smooth. Ethan slipped it carefully into his backpack beside his notebook. He knew it would become one of his most treasured keepsakes. Outside, the wind moved softly through the pine trees. The cabin settled into a deep, comforting silence. It was the kind of silence that made every breath feel slower, every heartbeat calmer. Samuel smiled gently. "Tomorrow morning, the river will have another story to share." Ethan looked toward the quiet window. The moon still shone above the trees, and somehow he felt that this peaceful night would stay in his heart long after the morning arrived. Episode 2, The Whispering River and the Hidden Cabin. Part 14. The cabin grew quieter as the night deepened. Outside, the whispering river continued its endless journey through the valley. The moon climbed a little higher into the sky, bathing the forest in soft silver light. Inside, the fire burned gently. The glowing embers gave the room a warm amber glow that danced softly across the wooden walls. Samuel placed another small piece of cedar wood onto the fire. A sweet, calming fragrance slowly filled the cabin. "It has always been my favorite wood," Samuel said quietly. "It reminds me that even a simple scent can become a beautiful memory." Ethan breathed in deeply. The air carried the comforting aroma of cedar, warm tea, old books, and fresh rain. It was a scent he knew he would remember for many years. Samuel walked toward a large wooden window. He opened it just a little. Cool night air drifted gently inside. With it came the peaceful sounds of the forest, the quiet murmur of the river, the soft rustling of pine branches, the distant call of an owl, the gentle chorus of crickets hidden among the grass. Samuel closed his eyes. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "The forest never becomes silent. It simply speaks more softly at night." Ethan listened. The sounds blended together so perfectly that they felt like gentle music. There was no beginning. There was no end. Only a peaceful rhythm that flowed through the valley. After a while, Samuel reached for a small wooden music box resting on a nearby shelf. Its surface was carved with tiny leaves and flowing water. He slowly turned the little key. A soft melody filled the cabin. It was slow, gentle, almost like a lullaby. The music floated quietly through the warm room, mixing with the crackling fire and the whispering river outside. Ethan smiled. "I've never heard a melody like that before." Samuel nodded. "My wife loved this music box. Every evening, before we went to sleep, she would wind it once, and we would simply sit together, without saying anything." He smiled warmly as he looked at the tiny music box. Some memories don't make us sad. They make us grateful. The melody slowly came to an end. The final note lingered softly in the air before fading into silence. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. The silence itself felt comforting. Ethan looked toward the window. The stars reflected upon the calm river, shimmering gently as the water flowed downstream. It looked as though the sky had quietly settled upon the river's surface. Samuel poured one final cup of warm chamomile tea for each of them. They drank slowly. Neither hurried. There was nowhere else to be, nothing else to do. Only this peaceful evening beside the hidden cabin. As the fire settled into glowing embers once again, Samuel looked toward Ethan with a gentle smile. "Tomorrow morning," he said softly, "I'll show you the oldest tree in the valley. They say it has watched over this river for more than 300 years. Ethan's eyes brightened with quiet excitement. He wondered what stories such an ancient tree might silently hold. Outside, the whispering river continued its peaceful song. Inside, the little cabin rested warmly beneath the moonlight, and the night carried them gently toward another beautiful morning.